do you get ahead in academia? There used to be an unwritten law: publish or perish. While lots of factors ultimately decide the fate of your career, the conventional wisdom has always been that you have to publish a lot and in as high impact factor journals as possible. Then, when you've applied for a job or for a promotion, you would have a long list of impressive publications with which you could make your case. Maybe there was a time this made sense. But the rise of publishing mills, which churn out an endless stream of poorly reviewed or unreviewed papers, special issues, and predatory publishing, have changed things. Plus, there's the concept of open science, an approach to doing science that is, in the words of the EU, collaborative, transparent, and accessible. More and more, academia is recognizing that the number of papers you publish may or may not have anything to say about your abilities as a scientist, as a researcher, as a colleague, and as a teacher. Oops. As we'll hear a little later in this webinar, Norway has recently drafted a document called Nurkam. It's a Norwegian career assessment matrix. It's part of an international trend. But what does this all really mean? Are we just talking about the need for change without being able to actually make changes in how we assess the quality of our academic employees? And how will all of this affect early career academics here at NTNU? Welcome to Science Conversations. I'm Nancy Basilchuk, a science writer at NTNU's Communication Division and host of the English language podcast, 63 Degrees North. I have three distinguished panelists with me today who will talk about the changing world of academic evaluation. Tor Grande, NTNU's Pro-Rector for Research and Dissemination, Nobel Laureate and NTNU Neuroscience, May-Britt Mosher, and Olav Bolland, Dean of NTNU's Faculty of Engineering. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Tor, I'm going to start with you. You were deeply involved in drafting the Nurkam document. Can you briefly summarize this document for our audience? What are the most important issues raised about the report that early career academics should know about?
Thank you. And I'm really happy that you brought up Nurkam as the first thing to start with. First of all, this is a kind of a toolbox for recognition and rewards in academic careers. A few keywords here is flexibility, diversity, and also transparency in a way we evaluate, but flexibility with respect to academic careers. There are 6 principles. It looks like this, by the way, for those who are watching. There are 3 principles which this is based on, and I think we will go through them through the day today. First of all, it's a measured quality of excellence, better balance between quantity and quality. The second one is the recognition of several different types of skills and competences in academia. And also the assessment of results and activities and complementation in the light of open science. This is really hard of the open science. Practice transparency in evaluation. The fifth one is actually to promote gender balance. And the last one is to assist and create practices of job vacancy announcements and assessment processes locally. Yeah, by short.
Okay. I have found myself wondering how the effort to change how we assess research and researcher quality relates to hiring and promotions now. I mean, have we already made this change? So maybe I'll start with Olav. How do you assess, what kind of assessments do you do with your candidates now for PhDs, postdocs, and professorships?
Yes, it is a bit different between, let's say, PhDs and professors. If you look at PhDs, it's very much about grades from their master education. It's also about having the right background, motivation, and also to some extent also experience in the field. But when you hire a professor, it's a broader set of, let's say, skills. Of course, merits in research is very important, but also the ability to teach. So we have this trial lecture where we test them. Also, we now put more emphasis on development work related to teaching. Have you done that? But also ability to secure funding for research. And One other thing that also is increasingly important for me is the ability to work in team. So we want people who do not lock themselves into their office, but we want people who can work together in teams.
What about Einstein then?
What about Einstein?
I think he was a team worker too.
Yeah. But
Very
Margaret,
good
what
one.
about at Kavli? What about at Kavli? When you're looking at, you must have a flood of people looking to come to you as postdocs, as PhDs, as professors. How do you look at these candidates? How do you judge them?
So thank you for asking this question. So it's, of course, like Olaf says, it's an extremely difficult process because you risk so much, and especially when you need to have people around you for ages, then you risk even more. So not only yourself and the environment, but also this person. So at our place, we think that what is extremely important with us is excellent science. This is the slogan: excellent science, happy people, happy animals, and diversity. So we don't want to clone ourselves. So that is one principle that is extremely important. And it's also important for us because we have questions at our institutes that we need people from really different backgrounds. So how do we get these people? So as you say, my email box and all others are just full. So and we are extremely picky, but we are so lucky, first of all, that we have a good network, so we can ask our colleagues in neuroscience, what do you think about this person? And as Olaf said, there are certain skills that you need to work at our place. And we don't want all to be the same. As I said, we need diversity. And then, so this publish or perish, of course, if they have never been a first author on a paper, they don't know how it is to be a scientist. So that is, of course, necessary. And of course, a good quality paper helps a lot. But now I shouldn't speak too much. Maybe we can ask more afterwards.
Yeah. What do you think, Tor?
I think both Olav and Margit it's a complicated process. It's a difficult process. When I was addressing transparency, is for young people to understand how process is going on, and that you actually have trust that the judgment and the way you are evaluated is fair. Fair from a perspective of an individual. And I'm really happy that Margit added diversity as a fourth slogan word.
And I forgot passion.
And passion, of course.
I think passion is
the central.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, science has changed over the years, and especially at the Kavli. I mean, you have to be a neuroscientist, but you're developing open source for, you have big data is an issue, or so there are different skills and competences you need in order to succeed with a group like at Kavli Institute.
In a team.
In a team, exactly. So diversity means different skills, different competences within a team.
Well, so, and when I hear you talking about this, it sounds like a lot of what Nurkam is identifying and other reform efforts, they seem like common sense, and they seem like to some extent they've already been baked into the system. But it's also very time consuming. So that I think is one of the issues with when it comes to using the number of publications, for example. It's kind of a shortcut in what otherwise is a really big and time-consuming effort to hire a new professor, hire a postdoc, sign on a PhD. Are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as we like to say in English, by saying, okay, we're really going to look away from all these publications?
Classical metrics you're using. No, I think it's. This is also about that you have some tools like the age index. You have tools like high impact journals and so on. But if you only use that without coercion, it give you probably the wrong impression of a person. So you really, if you really would like to evaluate, for example, a scientific work, you have to look at the quality of the work and not where it is published. I'll give you one example. Especially in neuroscience and life sciences, it's very important to reproduce data, reproduce results. And it's not often easy to get a publication in a so-called high-impact journal on a reproduction of something already published. But for the community, for the science, this is actually quite an essential thing. So that's why you cannot only judge the quality by where things are published.
Any thought?
Can I comment on that?
Yes, please. Don't ask permission. Just jump right in,
Okay,
May-Britt. I know you can do it.
No, so I know that Tor and I we agree, but I think what is important though is that when we have these high quality papers, we shouldn't forget the process to get them into these high quality journals, and the process itself is a learning journey, because you have inputs from 3, 4, 5 other internationally top researchers reading your work in detail and saying, this I don't agree with, this I don't understand, and can you make it clearer, can you explain better? And then we do that, and if we then go through this process that might take 1 year or even more, then you can deliver something that people can replicate, and we are really proud of the story. So I think that is also important.
Well, but it's interesting because, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I totally agree with May-Britt.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this process May-Britt is talking about is extremely educating for those who are involved.
But the problem that
tough.
It's tough.
Yeah.
But some of the questions that we got from our viewers ahead of time talk about this issue of like high risk and time. The fact that if you're a PhD, you have 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is, and you're doing what you consider to be cutting edge, really exciting work, and then you submit to a high impact journal. It's a high risk endeavor, and it can take a year or more.
Even longer.
And so the clock is ticking. What do you say to early career academics who want to strive for this kind of high risk, hard work endeavor, but the clock is really ticking for them? How do you support that? Go ahead, May-Britt.
No, this is such an important question, and it's so challenging. So I sometimes I don't sleep in the night because it's so challenging, because we have to believe that it will be okay, and we work so hard, and our people are working so hard. But what we try to do is to think about ways to come around it. And typically when people come to our lab, they will join an already started project, so that they get at least one publication that they can follow through, and then they work on their own projects after they are very well trained, so that I think we have secured most of our people in this way. So then they can both follow the high risk of other people in a good team, and they can sort of be in the driver's seat on other
on their
projects.
own work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree. You have to balance the risk of the PhD you're supervising, so that you secure that
Exactly.
you can produce something that is publishable, but also at the same time take some risk. And even if you don't succeed in reaching your goals, I think for a PhD and the evaluation of a PhD thesis, it's very much about how you have worked, your methodology, your analysis, and how you get to your conclusion. Even if that is a fail, it can be worthwhile in a PhD thesis.
So just tiny comment on this, because what I try to tell our people is that a PhD is not to reach a goal. It is a training to be a scientist, with all the failures, all the successes, the ways you need to think about things, and also to use the mountain rules in Norway. You have to know when you have to turn back and do something different.
Det är ingen skam att snu.
Yeah, I think it's there are Maybe it's a passion. Passion is incredibly important in science. And of course, if you don't want to spend some of your resources, some of your efforts into high risk, high gain area where there is a risk also to not succeed, but you also have to give the students confidence that they are able to contribute to some extent, and all the activities completing the thesis doesn't need to be at the same risk level, so to speak. And especially in the early beginning, to give them self-confidence, also to be even able to recognize themselves when they have moved the frontier of when they really are at the frontier of their own field. Then yeah, they have to build confidence. So if you start with a very extremely high risk at the beginning, then maybe some of them get lost on the way.
Well, but at least based on some of the questions that we got before the webinar started, there is this ideal or sort of idea that when we do a PhD here at NTNU or often elsewhere, it's a summary and then 3 papers that have been either published or in press. So does this Nurkam, does this...
I think to judge quality by numbers is not really this is really what this is about. So I'm very glad that the PhD regulation at NTNU has no requirements to the number of papers in the thesis. This is something actually some of our communities have decided, not NTNU as an institution. So that means that one really, really strong contribution could be more than enough for a thesis.
Yeah, I think over the years we have moved away from as a thesis monograph to paper-based, and I see some advantages of that, because as a PhD student, when you get your first paper published in a journal, it's an indication that you're on the right track, that you're on the right level. So it gives confidence in a rather early stage in the PhD program. I think also publishing is a way of gaining a network, so that you get an international network, get to know people in other countries, and they see what you are working with and reading your work. So I think that is important. And if you have only a monograph, very few people read that. So I think the outreach, the network part of it is very important.
So the idea that we do have this summary and then papers as a PhD rather than having this monograph, more or less.
Just to, I mean, the only way scientists communicate with each other, not the only way, but the most important way is actually to publish. So you cannot, so I completely agree with Ola that to start training of the students also to know the process of behind the publication is of course quite important. What I'm trying to say is that the number of papers is not necessarily the way to evaluate the quality.
But the papers are important nevertheless.
And of course, if a paper is never read by anyone, that's an indication that maybe it's not so interesting. But again,
it's hard to know.
Yeah.
Margaret, when you started your career early on, did you feel the pressure to publish?
You know, I'm the woman against the current. So if people try to pressure me, then oh yes. No, so I feel a bit ashamed to be here to talk about these topics, because I feel so special, because I went into science because I have the passion, and I didn't know about science from before. And I was thinking about it on the way here, that my involvement in science, I think, is like an artist, that you just go fully in. And then you don't ask about people who are evaluating you or trying to get you to get so and so many publications. You just go for what you believe in, and I want answers to my questions. And that is my passion, and try to stop me.
But I think you may be maybe you're a little unusual in that regard. I don't know if many people are quite as bold. Do you have any experience with this, Olav?
I think people are very much different, also based on the cultural background.
Diversity.
Yeah, diversity, yes. We see people from typically Asian countries which wants to have guidance and advices and do this, do that, while Norwegians are more individual and start working on things without being told to do so. So there is a diversity. People are different. Even Norwegians are different from each other. So,
Anything to add, Tor?
I think the passion May-Britt is describing. I think I recognize myself also on that track early in my career, that the passion for science was actually what was driving me into academia. And I think that for the young generation, I think May-Britt, she still has the passion, which I really admire.
Even after 60.
And I think that's
What?
and this is, should be an inspiration for the young generation. I hope so.
Yeah.
Can I just
Yes,
comment on
please
it?
do.
Because I was also thinking about that. Why do we live? Why do we do what we do? And why do we put so much effort into? So science is, as I said, like doing art. That you put.
It's a way of life.
Yes,
Yeah.
you put so much resources into it, and you think about it even when you're dreaming. At least if you are me, and then it's you go all in, and I think if you do go all in, then I think my PhD supervisor did it. He was like this, and such an inspiration. And he said, "You are in science to give people good stories, not only good stories like fake news, but stories that, as Tor said, can be replicated." And you give something to people. And I was so nervous to give talks, and he said, "Why are you nervous? You have so beautiful things to tell. Just think about them. They're sitting there thinking about and really wanted to hear what you have to tell." So when we are raised in such an environment as with Per Andersen, then it's a blessing for people like me to be allowed to do science.
And you also are trying to set up that kind of spirit in Kavli or in the Faculty of Engineering to promote that idea that you can have a passion, you can pursue it, and hopefully succeed. We have a video, actually. We asked Espen Solberg, who's head of research at NIFU, the Nordic Institute for Studies of Innovation, Research and Education, and Siri Borlaug, who's deputy head of research there, to share their thoughts about this idea of changing the way we look at research evaluation.
In research policy, we do see a general shift in the way research is evaluated. And we could summarize this as a turn from narrow metrics and golden standards towards broader criteria. I can point to 3 examples. Firstly, university rankings are increasingly contested worldwide, also by highly ranked institutions, actually. For instance, Yale Law School recently refrained from appearing in a US ranking, even though they were among the top ranked institutions. We also see in Norway that the Research Council are now assessing institutions and research groups not so much against international excellence criteria, but more against their own purposes and strategies, and simply asking what purpose they are expected to fulfill. And finally, assessments of individual researchers are now starting to include other and broader criteria than just the number of publications and grants.
But what are the implications of this shift, and what is research quality? Research quality is and has always been about much more than scientific impact, which is what we measure through citation and scientific publications. Research quality includes aspects like novelty or originality, research integrity, credibility, legitimacy, and relevance of the research for science and society. Furthermore, perceptions of research quality and the emphasis on the different aspects of quality, which I just mentioned, vary between fields of research. For instance, in some fields, societal relevance is of high importance, but less in other and perhaps more theoretical fields. The different aspects of quality may also vary between sites of evaluation. By that I mean evaluations done by the local organization, for instance, a department at NTNU, by knowledge communities or funding agencies. So when new and broader forms of research assessment are emerging, it should rather be seen as an opportunity to operationalize the multifaceted concept of research quality. Instead of research quality as one single standard, we should perhaps rather talk about research qualities in plural. But the question is then, how do we ensure that all relevant aspects of research quality are taken into account and that assessments are fair? And what are the implications of this for young researchers?
Okay, she asks a question but doesn't answer it. Well, how do we answer that question? How do we ensure that all of these different qualities get folded into an assessment of a researcher in various positions?
This is actually quite a challenge for the community. First of all, we cannot solve this as a country alone. This is international. So if you don't agree on an international level that we should do assessment in a different way in the future, it doesn't come any further. And luckily, I think this way of recognition of diversity is something you see that other countries is following up, not only in Europe, but also in the US and other countries. So, but it will take time. It will take time.
It's been, in doing the research for this webinar, I found this effort in San Francisco called I guess it's called DORA.
Yes.
Yeah, so Declaration of Research Assessment or something like that. But that's now 10 years old.
Exactly.
And so it's, to me, and we've talked about this before, it almost seems like who's going to really commit fully with their whole body to this change in evaluation? The funding agencies have to make the change. We as an institution have to really commit to it. But even though I hear that you're doing it at Kavli, and that there's certainly this intention to do it at NTNU, I'm not sure we're quite there yet. So what do we do?
I think we are at an early stage in also assessing a variety of qualities. But I think as a starting point, quality in publication is for me that you have to contribute with something novel, something new, something that is moving the knowledge frontier. And I think any researcher, a PhD student or a professor should be able, when considering a publication, what is the contribution to the scientific community in that field. If you are not able to clearly answer that question, maybe you should delay the publication and work somewhat more. Because I think it's important that in a paper, in a thesis, that you're able and you actually state what is the contribution here, what is moving the knowledge frontier. That is for me the most important quality of, let's say, a paper.
Any thoughts?
I mean, at least from my perspective, the reason why I'm concerned with this is first of all, I support the intention, but I'm in some degree a bit worried that academia is not an attractive career path for many young scientists. Someone is giving up under the way, and that worries me a lot, because I think we need to make sure that we will have more May-Britt Mosers in the future. Because we need talent, absolutely, and especially in the world we are living, there are challenges to solve, and that needs talents. So, from my perspective, my engagement is for the young scientists.
Anything to add, May-Britt?
Yeah, curiosity, because now I'm really curious how can you create more May-Britts?
No, I think if you're not able to keep the, let's say, the passion and the drive to really be engaged in trying to push the knowledge fronts, as Ola is saying, if you lose that as the kind of the mindset, and you leave science, then you have lost quite a lot of talents. And I think diversity means that you have also a diversity of talent, and I think that will contribute for science in general. And I think fairness from a democratic point of view is important.
Yeah, no, so I think what is important is that we as leaders know what to do, and that we get people to calm down, not to be lazy, but to calm down so that they're not scared or these problems, because then the creativity is just going down. So we should sort of be there as parents to support them, but still allow them to ask these excellent questions and push them to do this high risk, but that they should have this feeling that we care.
That or that they're safe.
Nurturing.
Yeah. but safe is also difficult because we can't guarantee. So I once had, maybe I shouldn't tell this story. I can tell it afterwards.
No.
Because sometimes you people think that you are a magician because, for example, at our environment, that since we are spoiled with fantastic people and we have had success with our stories, there are also failures. And then we can't guarantee. What we can guarantee is that we will give you all we can, but there's a limit. And sometimes the science, as I said, you have to know when to turn, and so we have to work with the people. So, but what I think is important is to try to be a good model in not giving up this idea that we need excellent science.
A lot of what we're talking about right now is specifically research, right? But Nurkam goes well beyond that. It talks about teaching, it talks about tool development, it talks about public outreach, which is something that's not surprisingly very near and dear to my heart. I mean, how do we fold that into this assessment or this decision to hire or to give someone a postdoc? Somebody who's maybe good at science, but also has some of these other characteristics. How do you shift to not just have that single focus on research?
I think when we started today talking about the hiring process of a young scientist, and then often you assess maybe the research background of the person, and maybe also if they have some experience in education. I think that's a good starting point. But as you move on in your career, you can make contributions, for example, in outreach activity, which is also important for science. It could be entrepreneurship if you have followed up a good idea, and actually that is basically the foundation for a new business development or something. Mm-hmm. So I mean, the diversity also means diversity in skills, and so to give recognition for other contributions than the classical ones, and not necessarily the same requirements for everyone, except the diversity also on an individual level, I think. And the sum of the individual makes the team. And we talked about teamwork here.
And the sum is so much bigger than the parts.
Yeah.
But you at Kavli are so very focused on advancing the science of the brain and how it works and how all these different aspects about how we know where we are and how we perceive things and how we know how fast we're going. But recently you've had this breakthrough with this mini 2P microscope. That's really a skill. That's a tool. Mm-hmm. Was that a deliberate choice on your part? Was that something you said we really need to move further?
No,
Is that something you prioritize?
So what we are really eager to do is to ask our questions, and in order to address the questions, we need new technology all the time. And then talking about recruiting, I have to tell the story if I'm allowed to.
Yes.
So when Edward was in Beijing, he got this excellent PhD student following him for 2 hours in a taxi around in Beijing to all his places. And that was Wei Jian's song in our lab now. And he was on his way to the States to do a postdoc there. But Edward heard him telling about this miniscope that he was developing in Beijing. And then Edward just was so impressed, and he jumped on Wei Jian and said, "You have to come to Trondheim, and you have to work with biologists or neuroscientists in order to adapt this miniscope to real challenges and questions." And somehow Edward convinced him. He can be extremely convincing, Edward. So in this way, Wei Jian came to us and worked with the people that we already had in the lab. And again, the parts were so much smaller than the sum. And he's excellent. But then together with this excellent people with us, then it was just an amazing thing that happened. We can look at cells when the mouse is running with his microscope in its
so
head.
maybe just for those who don't know, maybe you can give us one sentence that describes what it is.
So you can manipulate these brain cells either with viruses or with manipulating the mutant genes through family.
Yeah.
And then you can look at cells that are active, and you have a tiny scanner in this less than 3 gram miniscope that you put, the Mini 2P, that you put on the animal, and it can even jump a tall tower, and you see the same quality cells and activity of those. So it's just an amazing tool, and now we can see thousands of active cells at the same time. Who could imagine that was possible?
Olav, in engineering, I mean, I think in some ways, you and May-Britt are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Because you're interested in basic science, sort of how does the brain work?
But we need tools.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what I was going to say. So how does that play into your evaluations or your sort of thoughts about within your faculty? Because you certainly have theoretical folks, but engineering, I think about engineers like, both my daughters are engineers, so it's like, Mom, you got a problem? I can fix it. So how does that play into your sort of assessment of building diversity, of deciding how different departments or the departments themselves deciding how do they prioritize the tool maker versus the theoretical person?
No, I think a strength of also faculty of engineering that we are very broad, diverse. So we have people working with very basic theoretical things, and we have those very much into applications and making tools and make things work. So I think in many of our research group we have a mix of these people, and I think that is a strength.
And how do you support that? How do you encourage? Do you need to encourage that, or does it
no,
just happen?
I think that is happening because also we have, as I said before, people are different, but I think we want to ensure that we have this very strong theoretical people around, and at the same time also people that have some industrial experience and have their mind into solving problems for related to applications. So I think we put together our research groups very much also with the mind that we want to have this diversity.
So the change is happening. But wait, okay. Before we're starting to run short on time. And I have see all these little red tabs. These are all the questions we got beforehand. So I'm going to try to ask some of these, and maybe we can have a quick answer. So one viewer wrote, I'm interested to know how open AI, like ChatGPT and others, will affect the publishing quality versus quantity issue. Since this AI may lead to even more and faster publishing, a focus on quality may be more important than ever. So how will quality be assessed? So all of a sudden I'm working with all my research, and ChatGPT can help me generate even more papers. Is that
This is a very important issue, because I think the artificial intelligence has come to be. I mean, it's going to be here, whatever, if you want it or not.
Yeah, you can't stop.
It's like the colored television that they warned about. Don't see things in colors.
You'll never go back.
So the question is to use it wisely. And I'm sure over time it will start to be used wisely, but it also will be misused, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe publications will be changed in the future with this new technology, that it will be so easy, like you're doing Google searches, you find very much useful information, and writing a paper with all the introduction and so on, maybe we can skip that. But I think what AI cannot provide is the novelty, the, let's say, new knowledge. So I think that will be.
Well, you cannot create the frontier.
No.
Right.
That has to be done by the human brain.
Because it's just based on what's out there already.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we Edward and I got an email from a person who was searching for grid cells through this ChatGPT, and the result was just so strange.
Yeah.
So it was just a mix of things that was put together in something that looked very logic and beautiful, but it was completely nonsense.
Just garbage. Well, that may change. All right, so we've got just a few minutes left. I want to round off by asking you, what's the big takeaway for these eager, young, early career academics? Olav?
Yeah, I think my takeaway message will be that when you, as a PhD, are going to publish, I think you should ask yourself the question: what is the scientific contribution in your work? How are you moving the scientific frontier? And if it's difficult to describe that, I suggest that you maybe do not publish that paper. But also that the scientific contribution, when you're clear about what is the answer to that question, put it in the paper, in the summary.
Okay. Tor, big takeaway for our early career academics out there, wondering if they can now avoid having their papers counted?
No, I think in science, I think it's key, passion is important, curiosity is important. Make sure also that you are in an environment giving you good mentorship and supervision. And then learning by doing, but passion. I think that's a good starting point when you want to move a scientific field forward.
May-Britt, you get the last word.
Yeah, then I will give you a word that I had already given to somebody, and they gave it back to me, and I thought, wow, this was quite interesting, good. So if I remember it correctly, then it's, don't do what others expect from you. Do what you expect from yourself. And then you find also your passion, and then you will find out, is this the path that you love or not?
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and thanks to my panelists. I think we're...
Thanks for inviting us.
Oh,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
It was fun.